This is a story about a Cajun American mechanic on Vermilion Boulevard in Lafayette, Louisiana, who spent 21 years at Shelby American in Las Vegas before life forced him to come home to the converted 1962 service station his father had owned since the year Richard Nixon won his first presidential election. It is a story about a husband and wife couple from Houston who built a $2.8 billion oil and classic car empire and decided that one small auto restoration garage on Vermilion Boulevard was the only thing standing between them and another $620 million. It is a story about a 1967 Shelby Cobra 4.7 Super Snake that was supposed to be one of two ever built. It was not. It was, as we will discover, a 1965 Shelby Cobra 427 competition with a chassis number that had been ground down and restamped using period-correct dies that had been stolen from Shelby American in Las Vegas in 1992, and that the Federal Bureau of Investigation had never been able to recover. It is a story about an attic trunk in a bayou cabin in the Atchafalaya Basin that a Cajun American auto parts dealer named J.B. Thibodeau had kept locked for 56 years for reasons no one, including his own son, had fully understood. And it is a story about 14 letters that a registered nurse named Emily Thibodeau had written to her 7-year-old daughter in the 8 months between her glioblastoma diagnosis in March of 2016 and her death on the 14th of November of the same year. This story takes place in Lafayette, Louisiana between October of 2027 and November of 2028. It begins on a cold Friday morning in late October in a converted service station 2 blocks west of the Vermilionville Cajun Heritage Park, with the smell of chicory coffee and the sound of a brand-new black Cadillac Escalade pulling into a parking lot that had not received a luxury vehicle from Houston since the previous owner died in 2016. Beau Thibodeau had been a Carroll Shelby licensed restoration modifier at Shelby American in Las Vegas, Nevada, for 21 years before his wife was diagnosed with glioblastoma multiforme stage 4 in March of 2016, and he had been the sole owner of Thibodeau Performance on Vermilion Boulevard in Lafayette, Louisiana, for 11 years and 7 months after that. The transition between those two lives had cost him his benefits, his profit sharing, his place in the master technician rotation at Shelby American's Las Vegas headquarters, his standing in the small community of Carroll Shelby Foundation-affiliated restorers in Nevada and Arizona and California, and approximately $125,000 per year in income that the small classic restoration business on Vermilion Boulevard could not, no matter how hard he worked, fully replace. What it had not cost him was his daughter. Adele Thibodeau was 17 years old. She had been accepted on early decision to the Louisiana State University Honors College pre-med program on the early notification date of December 18, 2027, a notification Beau and Adele were both expecting in less than 8 weeks, on a partial scholarship that would pay $120,000 across 4 years, and that would make Adele, when she matriculated in August of 2028, the first member of the Thibodeau family in 3 generations to attend an American university on her own academic merit rather than through the GI Bill that had carried Beau's father J.B. to the small accounting program at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette in 1971. Adele had inherited her mother's dark hair and her grandmother Mama Thibodeau's Cajun stillness and the particular way her father, when concentrating on a difficult diagnostic problem, leaned slightly to the left to favor his good ear over his bad one. She did not know on the morning of October 22, 2027, that her father's tinnitus was beginning to deteriorate into something more serious. Beau had not told her. Beau had not told anyone. Emily Thibodeau had been a registered nurse on the oncology ward at Lafayette General Medical Center for 14 years before she had begun to experience severe morning headaches and visual disturbances in February of 2016. She had scheduled the MRI herself between shifts without telling Beau. The diagnosis had come on March 17, 2016. St. Patrick's Day, a date which would, in the 7 years and 7 months that followed, never again be acknowledged in the Thibodeau household. Glioblastoma multiforme, stage 4, median survival 12 to 15 months. Emily had been 38 years old. Adele had been 7, Beau had been 45. Beau had quit Shelby American on March 24, 2016, exactly 1 week after the diagnosis. Joe Conway and Neil Cummings, the co-chief executive officers of Carroll Shelby International, had offered him an indefinite leave of absence with full medical benefits and a guaranteed position upon return. Beau had thanked them and declined. He had driven the 23 hours and 42 minutes from Las Vegas to Lafayette in his 1968 Shelby Mustang GT350, with the radio off, stopping only for fuel and a single phone call to his mother, Mama Thibodeau, at a gas station in Beaumont, Texas, to ask her to begin preparing the small back bedroom of his and Emily's home on Carroll Drive for what was about to come. Emily had undergone surgery on April 12th at MD Anderson in Houston, the first of 3 procedures she would endure before the second tumor presented in August. She had begun writing the letters in early May, between the radiation therapy sessions in the mornings and the chemotherapy sessions in the afternoons. There would be 14 of them in total by the time she finished in the second week of October. 1 for Adele's 8th birthday, 1 for Adele's 10th birthday, 1 for the morning Adele began menstruating. 1 for Adele's first heartbreak, 1 for Adele's high school graduation, 1 for Adele's 18th birthday, 1 for Adele's college acceptance, 1 for Adele's wedding day if Adele chose to marry, which Emily had written carefully so that Adele would not feel pressured if she did not, 1 for Adele's first child if Adele chose to have one, and 4 others Beau had not by October of 2027 opened or read or even fully cataloged. Emily had died on November 14, 2016, 8 months and 28 days after her diagnosis. Adele had been 7 years old. She had not, in the 11 years and 1 month since, ever spoken to her father about the morning her mother had died. Beau's father, Jean-Baptiste J.B. Thibodeau, had served in the United States Army as an artillery specialist at Fort Polk, Louisiana, from 1966 through 1970. He had founded J.B. Thibodeau Auto Parts on Vermilion Boulevard in Lafayette in 1968. He had become Carroll Shelby's official Louisiana parts dealer in the spring of 1973, a relationship that would last until J.B. retired and sold the parts business in 1985. He had restored classic Italian and American sports cars as a hobby for 43 years. He had died of a sudden cardiac event at the small kitchen table on Carroll Drive on a Sunday afternoon in August of 2016 at the age of 70. He had died exactly 3 months and 4 days before Emily. He had kept records, handwritten correspondence. A locked attic trunk in the Bayou cabin on the Atchafalaya Basin near Henderson, Louisiana, which had been in the Thibodeau family since 1923, which Beau had not, in 11 years and 2 months, fully cataloged. Mama Thibodeau, Beau's 78-year-old mother, lived in the family's Acadian raised cottage on Old Spanish Trail 4 miles west of the garage. She had emigrated from Acadia Parish with her mother in 1948 at the age of 3. She had been widowed since JB's death. She came to Beau's small house on Carroll Drive on Sunday afternoons with a large cast-iron pot of gumbo or jambalaya or boudin or crawfish étouffée, and she did not speak about Emily because there were certain absences that did not require words after a certain number of years. Thibodeau Performance was a converted 1962 Esso service station that JB had purchased in 1968 with the down payment from his United States Army discharge bonus. It sat between a small Cajun bakery called Boudreaux's Boudin and a Domino Park on Vermilion Boulevard. The shop specialized in Shelby Mustangs and Shelby Cobras and other Carroll Shelby-associated American performance vehicles from the 1962 through 1995 production years for collectors who had heard, through the small network of Carroll Shelby Foundation-affiliated mechanics in the Gulf Coast region, that Beau Thibodeau would diagnose anything they brought him, would charge fair rates, and would tell them the truth even when Carroll Shelby International or any of the southern auction houses would not. Beau had one apprentice. His name was Trevor Boudreaux. He was 22 years old, Cajun American by way of his father from Erath and his mother from Breaux Bridge, and a graduate of the Northeast Texas Community College Carroll Shelby Automotive Service Technician Program in Pittsburgh, Texas. He earned $24 an hour, which was $3 more than Beau could comfortably afford to pay, and which Beau paid anyway because Trevor had ambitions to work as a senior technician at Shelby American in Las Vegas someday, and Beau did not. He had decided in the 3rd month of Trevor's employment intend to be the man who told him that ambitions of that scale were beyond the reach of a kid from Erath whose mother taught 3rd grade at Holy Family Catholic School. On the morning of Friday, October 22, 2027, Beau opened the garage at 6 in the morning and did 3 things he had done every morning for 11 years and 7 months. He started the small Chicory coffee percolator on the counter behind the register, because the strong New Orleans Chicory blend was, in his view, the only coffee a serious mechanic would drink in southern Louisiana. He turned on the overhead halogens in Bay 1, which were the only thing keeping the shop bright enough for proper diagnostic work during a Lafayette October, when the Cypress shadows from the Vermilion River fell long across the property by 10 in the morning. And he opened the small drawer in the back office desk that contained the 14 letters Emily had written between May and October of 2016. And he selected by the rotation Emily had requested he follow, the letter she had written for Adele's 8th birthday. The first letter, which Adele had received on November 23, 2016, 9 days after her mother's death. Beau read it every October because Adele's 8th birthday had been the first time Adele had read it, and reading it again each year was the closest Beau came to being in the same room with Emily reading it to Adele for the first time. He poured the chicory into a small ceramic cup, sat at the desk in the back office, and opened the appointment book. There was one appointment that day. It was scheduled for 10 in the morning. The customer name was listed as C. Whitfield and V. Whitfield. The vehicle was listed as a 1967 Shelby Cobra 427 Super Snake. The reason for visit was listed as private authentication for international sale. Beau had not authenticated a Carroll Shelby vehicle for a private collector since 2018. He sat at the desk for a long time. He drank his chicory. He waited for Trevor to arrive at 6:30. He did not yet know that Carter Whitfield III and Vivian Whitfield, the 62-year-old and 58-year-old husband and wife couple, who had built Whitfield Energy into a $2.8 billion South Texas oil and classic car investment company over 4 decades, would arrive at his garage in 4 hours in a black Cadillac Escalade and a charcoal gray Lincoln Navigator, accompanied by Vivian's 24-year-old daughter Tiffany Whitfield and 3 corporate attorneys from a Houston-based firm called Greer, Halloran & Crow, and would carry on the enclosed transport trailer behind them a Bianco Polo Park Lamb. No. That was the wrong vehicle. The trailer carried a Wimbledon white Shelby Cobra 427 that was, in addition to many other things, not actually a 1967 Shelby Cobra 427 Super Snake. He only knew that the chicory was hot. The letters in the desk drawer were still where Emily had asked him to keep them, and Adele would be at the small kitchen table on Carmel Drive in 23 minutes, eating a slice of warm boudin her grandmother had brought over the previous evening, reading the Kate Chopin paperback Beau had given her for her 17th birthday in October. Carter Whitfield III arrived at Thibodaux Performance at 10:03 in the morning in a black Cadillac Escalade with Texas plates. He was followed by a charcoal gray Lincoln Navigator containing his wife Vivian Whitfield, her 24-year-old daughter Tiffany Whitfield, and the 3 attorneys from Greer, Halloran & Crow. Behind both vehicles, on a single-axle enclosed transport trailer pulled by a Ford F-450 Super Duty in Whitfield Energy Navy and Silver, sat a Wimbledon white Shelby Cobra that Beau had not previously seen in person but which he recognized, within 40 seconds of seeing it, as a vehicle whose paperwork would not survive the morning. Carter walked into the office at 10:06 wearing a navy bespoke King and Bay suit, a starched white French cuff dress shirt, with gold cufflinks bearing the Phi Gamma Delta crest, and a pair of black hand-stitched Lucchese boots that were, as he would later mention to Vivienne with audible pride, the same pair he had worn to George W. Bush's second inauguration in 2005. He was 62 years old, 5 feet 11 inches tall, 220 pounds, with the kind of late-period Texas oil dynasty physique that suggested both serious gym membership and serious confidence in the room. He had been the chief executive officer of Whitfield Energy for 38 years, having taken the company from his father, Carter Whitfield Jr. in 1985 at the age of 20, after his father's sudden cardiac event during a hunting trip on the family's 18,000-acre East Texas ranch. Carter had inherited approximately $180 million from his father in 1985. He had, over the subsequent 41 years, parlayed that inheritance into a $2.8 billion South Texas private oil and classic car investment portfolio that included, as of October of 2027, 22 historic Acadian raised cottages and 1 converted 1962 Esso service station in Lafayette Parish, Louisiana, that he intended to demolish in the spring of 2028 for a $620 million luxury condominium and regional headquarters project called Lafayette Energy Tower. One of the 22 historic structures was the Cajun bakery Boudreaux's Boudin, One of the structures was Mama Thibodeau's Acadian, raised cottage on Old Spanish Trail, which had been in continuous Thibodeau family ownership since 1872. One of the structures was the converted Esso service station that housed Thibodeau Performance. Lafayette Parish Council was scheduled to vote on the project's required variance on November 30, 2027, 39 days from the morning Carter walked into Beau's office. Vivian Whitfield walked in behind her husband at 10:07. She was 58 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, 125 pounds, with ash blonde hair and a perfectly maintained shoulder-length cut, gray eyes behind tortoise-shell Purcell reading glasses, and the kind of Dallas socialite posture that suggested both serious Pilates membership and serious familiarity with Sotheby's, New York. She had been a senior Texas specialist at Sotheby's Classic American Muscle Car division since 2012. Her first marriage to oil heir Bradford Whitman had ended in 2009 with a $40 million settlement and primary custody of her daughter Tiffany, who was now 24 years old, a University of Nexus Austin Phi Gamma Delta Sister Chapter alumna, and a Dallas socialite with, as Beau would learn within the next 11 minutes, a personal relationship with the LSU Vice Chancellor for undergraduate admissions whom she had met at a Phi Gamma Delta UT-LSU alumni reception in Houston in March of 2026. Tiffany Whitfield did not walk into the office. She remained in the Lincoln Navigator with the 3 attorneys, scrolling through her phone, dressed in a cream cashmere sweater set and a pair of nude-colored Chanel ballet flats that retailed, as Adele would observe to Beau later that afternoon when she returned from school, for somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,400. Adele was in the corner of the office on the small wooden bench that J.B. Thibodeau had built for Beau when Beau was 9 years old, reading The Awakening by Kate Chopin. She did not look up. She had inherited from her grandfather the discipline of not looking up when people one did not wish to engage with entered a room. Trevor was in Bay 2, performing a torque check on the rear differential bolts of a 1970 Boss Mustang 302 that an oil field customer from Erath had brought in for restoration prep. He had heard the Cadillac Escalade arrive. He had stopped working. He was now standing very still beside the lift, holding a torque wrench, watching the office through the open bay door. Beau looked at Carter and Vivian Whitfield and did not stand up. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield, please sit down." They sat. The 3 attorneys remained in the Lincoln Navigator. Tiffany remained on her phone. Vivian removed her reading glasses and placed them on the desk between herself and Beau in a gesture that was, Beau understood within 3 seconds of seeing it, deliberate. "Mr. Thibodeau," Vivian said, "thank you for taking the appointment. We were referred to you by a mutual acquaintance in the Carroll Shelby Foundation network. The foundation board, as you may know, has on occasion declined to authenticate vehicles where the provenance trail is complex. We are looking for an authentication that the foundation cannot or will not provide. We are prepared to compensate you $65,000 in cash for the authentication. Our buyer in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia closes the international wire transfer on December 18th. We would like the authentication letter signed by November 30th. She paused. There are, as you may have heard, certain matters before the Lafayette Parish Council on November 30th as well. Matters that affect the variance on the building you are currently sitting in. The Parish Council, as currently constituted, is unlikely to grant the variance. But variances can be requested again in subsequent quarters, and Whitfield Energy has, on a number of occasions, withdrawn requests for variances when local commercial circumstances suggested that withdrawal would be preferable to the council member's attention to specific tenancies. Your mother's home on Old Spanish Trail, the Acadian raised cottage. It has been in your family since 1872, I believe. That is also among the structures the council will be voting on. Your daughter Adele has, I understand, applied to Louisiana State University Honors College on early decision. The Vice Chancellor for undergraduate admissions, Dr. Margaret Reeves is a personal friend of my daughter Tiffany's, whom they met at a Phi Gamma Delta UT-LSU alumni reception in Houston in March of last year. Dr. Reeves has been, in the past, very interested in supporting the applications of local Louisiana students whose families have demonstrated cooperative relationships with the regional business community. Mr. Thibodeau, you and I and my husband both know how Texas and Louisiana business works. $65,000 buys 9 months of garage rent. Your mother's home buys a place to die. Your daughter's future buys forever. I am paying you for a signature, not for an opinion. Please understand the difference. Bo looked at Adele, who was now looking up from the Chopin paperback. Adele's expression was the expression Emily had worn on the night of October 16, 2015, when Emily had told Bo at the small kitchen table on Carmel Drive that she had been promoted to charge nurse on the oncology ward at Lafayette General Medical Center, and that her hourly rate was going up by $3.40 an hour, which would mean approximately $7,000 additional dollars in annual household income, which would, Emily had said with a small careful smile she wore when she was about to ask Bo for something, allow them to take Adele to Disney World in Orlando the following summer for the first time. It was the look of a child who was preparing to be disappointed by the man she had been raised to believe would never disappoint her. Bo turned back to Carter and Vivian Whitfield. He did not respond to the offer. Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield. May I see the vehicle, please? Carter nodded once. One of the attorneys exited the Lincoln Navigator with the key. Bo took it. He stood up. He walked through Bay 1, past Trevor, who he did not acknowledge, and out into the October sun. He spent 14 minutes walking around the trailer before he asked the F-450 driver to unload it. Bo Thibodeau began the inspection at 10:31 in the morning and finished at 2:06 in the afternoon. The work took 3 hours and 35 minutes. Carter and Vivian Whitfield remained in the air-conditioned office for the entire duration. The three attorneys from Greer, Halloran, and Crow rotated in and out of the Lincoln Navigator, taking turns making phone calls. Tiffany Whitfield remained on her phone the entire time. Adele sat on the small wooden bench, reading the Chopin paperback, and then, at approximately 11:30, set the paperback down and walked into Bay 1 and stood approximately 10 feet away from her father, watching him work. Bo did not ask her to leave. Trevor, who had finished the Boss Mustang torque check, quietly took up a position in Bay 3 where he could see Bo work without appearing to watch. Bo's first action was to perform a full visual inspection of the vehicle's exterior, undercarriage and engine compartment, using a small LED headlamp and a magnifying loupe that he had purchased from a Carroll Shelby International Parts catalog in 2008 during his promotion ceremony from senior technician to master restorer at Shelby American's Las Vegas headquarters. The visual inspection took 53 minutes. He did not speak during the inspection. He took 27 photographs with his cell phone. He made no notes. His second action was to retrieve from the locked steel cabinet beside the desk in the back office a small leather-bound notebook labeled Shelby Cobra 427, 1965 through 1967 in his own handwriting. The notebook contained Bo's personal restoration records from his 21 years at Shelby American, supplemented over the subsequent 11 years with publicly available auction records, foundation registry updates, and his own correspondence with the small community of Carroll Shelby-affiliated restorers in California, Nevada, and Arizona. The notebook contained a section on the two 1967 Shelby Cobra 427 Super Snakes, of which only 2 had ever been built. The first, designated CSX 3D1T, had been Carroll Shelby's personal vehicle. He had kept it until 2007, when he had sold it to a private collector in Texas for $5 million. The second, designated CSX 3303, had been sold by Shelby American in 1968 to a Hollywood entertainer who had returned the vehicle to the dealer after 1 week, citing the power. The dealership employee who had taken the car home that night had crashed it. He had died in the crash. The surviving wreckage had been rebuilt as a Holy Grail vehicle by a small Las Vegas restoration shop in 2008, working under the supervision of 3 master restorers from Shelby American, one of whom had been Bo Thibodeau. Bo had spent 480 hours on the CSX 3303 wreckage restoration. He had personally documented every visible damage scar on the chassis crossmember. He had taken 78 photographs of those damage patterns. Those photographs were in the leather-bound notebook. He carried the notebook into Bay 1. He set it on the small workbench beside the engine compartment of the Whitfield Cobra. He opened the notebook to the section on CSX 3303. He compared the damage patterns documented in his 2008 restoration photographs to the chassis of the vehicle that Carter and Vivian Whitfield had brought to his garage that morning. There were no matching damage scars. The Whitfield vehicle had never been crashed in 1969. The Whitfield vehicle had never been rebuilt as the Holy Grail Bill Cosby Super Snake. The Whitfield vehicle was not CSX 3303. His third action was to retrieve, from the small toolbox he kept beside the workbench, a portable X-ray fluorescent spectrometer manufactured by Thermo Fisher Scientific. The unit was a Niton XL5 Plus. He had purchased it used from a Carroll Shelby International auction of decommissioned Las Vegas testing equipment in 2021 for $14,200. He had calibrated it himself using certified aluminum and steel reference samples that he had retained from his Shelby American years. He took 4 spectrometer readings on the chassis stamping area. He took confirmatory readings on the engine block casting marks. He took confirmatory readings on 3 locations on the body panels. He set the spectrometer on the workbench. He walked back into the office. Adele followed him. Bo sat down at the desk. He picked up his chicory, which was now cold. He took a small sip. He looked at Carter and Vivian Whitfield. Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield, the vehicle you purchased at the Mecum, Indianapolis auction in May of 2025 for $4.8 million is not the second 1967 Shelby Cobra 427 Super Snake. It is a 1965 Shelby Cobra 427 competition. Retail value approximately $2.1 million, which was modified by a Swiss workshop operating between approximately 1995 and 2000 to resemble a 1967 Super Snake. The chassis number has been ground down and re-stamped using period-correct stamping dies that were stolen from Shelby American Las Vegas in 1992. The original Federal Bureau of Investigation case on the stolen dies was opened in November of 1992. It was suspended in 1995. The dies were never recovered. The Swiss workshop responsible for this counterfeit was identified by the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 2018 as part of a network that produced approximately 14 counterfeit Italian and American classic sports cars between 1993 and 2004. 2 of the 14 have been recovered. 3 additional counterfeits have been identified in the past 12 months. This vehicle is the 4th. He paused. He looked at Adele. He looked back at Carter. You did not buy a Super Snake, Mr. Whitfield. You bought a 60-year-old Lafayette Parish auto parts dealer's most carefully documented absence. 43 words. Approximately 23 seconds. Calm, devastating. Carter Whitfield did not respond for several seconds. Vivian's hand on the desk had gone still. Through the open office door, one of the attorneys in the Lincoln Navigator had stopped speaking into his phone. Adele had moved to a position directly behind Bo, where she could see Vivian's face, but where Vivian could not, without turning, see Adele's. Vivian spoke first. Mr. Thibodeau, we are prepared to increase the authentication compensation to $125,000. The vehicle is a counterfeit, Mrs. Whitfield. I am unable to authenticate a counterfeit. Carter spoke. My wife's daughter's relationship with Dr. Reeves at LSU will not affect my daughter's application. I have, in anticipation of the conversation we are now having, retained the Lafayette office of Adams and Reese LLP. They are familiar with the case. They will, on December 19th, file a complaint with the Louisiana Board of Regents, the Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, the LSU Office of the President, and the editorial board of the Acadiana Advocate regarding any inappropriate communication between Dr. Reeves and your stepdaughter Tiffany related to my daughter Adele's application. The complaint will name Tiffany. It will name Dr. Reeves. It will name Mrs. Whitfield. It will name you. He paused. And the variance, Mr. Whitfield. The November 30th Parish Council vote. I am aware of it. I have, since June of this year, been collecting documentation of Whitfield Energy's acquisitions of Lafayette Parish historic structures through shell entities, including the Caribbean and Cayman Island shell entities that own the 22 properties currently slated for demolition. I have shared the documentation with 2 reporters at the Acadiana Advocate and 1 at the New Orleans Times-Picayune. The variance, as my mother-in-law would say in Cajun French, est mort et enterré. It is dead and buried. It is unlikely to be granted whether or not I sign your authentication letter. The variance, in other words, is not a lever you currently possess. It is a circumstance you are attempting to leverage. There is a difference. He paused again. I have been preparing for the conversation we are having for 9 years and 7 months, Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield. I am not unprepared. Carter Whitfield stood up slowly. Vivian stood up beside him. The attorneys in the Lincoln Navigator opened their doors. Carter walked to the office doorway. He stopped. He turned back. Mr. Thibodeau, the Saudi buyer wires the funds on December 18th regardless of authentication. He does not. The Saudi buyer requires independent third-party authentication. Mrs. Whitfield said so herself 11 minutes after she walked into my office. He will not wire the funds without it. Which means he will not wire the funds at all. Which means you will be filing the Mecum rescission paperwork on December 19th at the latest. which means your fourth quarter Whitfield Energy Private Investments ledger for 2027 will close with a $4.8 million acquisition you cannot recover from the original seller, because the original seller is a Texas shell company controlled by your wife's first cousin Travis Whitman of Beaumont, who acquired the vehicle through a private sale from a Swiss intermediary in 2022 for $1.9 million. I have not been preparing only for this conversation, Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield. I have been preparing for all of the conversations that follow it. Carter and Vivienne Whitfield looked at Beau Thibodeau for a long moment. They turned. They walked out of the office. The three attorneys followed them. The Cadillac Escalade and the Lincoln Navigator and the Ford F-450 with the trailer all started their engines and pulled out of the parking lot in formation. They turned east on Vermilion Boulevard toward I-49. The office was silent. Adele walked around the desk. She stood in front of her father. She looked at Beau with an expression that Beau had not seen on her face since the funeral. "Papa, a deal. Grospere's letters were always going to be enough, weren't they?" "They were. Papa, tell me what we do now." Beau Thibodeau did not call anyone for the rest of Friday afternoon. He sent Trevor home at 3 o'clock. He drove Adele back to the small house on Carmel Drive at 4:30. He sat with Adele at the kitchen table while Adele ate a small bowl of jambalaya that Mama Thibodeau had brought over the previous evening. He did not at any point during dinner discuss the events of the morning. He did not after dinner take out his cell phone. He sat in the small porch swing on the front of the house from approximately 7 in the evening until approximately 10 at night, watching the headlights pass on Carmel Drive and waiting. He was waiting, although Adele did not know it, and although Beau had not explicitly framed it to himself in these terms, for Aaron Shelby. Aaron Shelby was 54 years old. He was the grandson of Carroll Shelby. He had served on the board of directors of Carroll Shelby International since April 2016, and he was the co-president of the Carroll Shelby Foundation since 2020. His day job was as the Dallas-Fort Worth area president of Prosperity Bank. He had inherited, upon his grandfather's death in May of 2012, Carroll Shelby's personal 1965 Cobra 427 Roadster, which he kept in a climate-controlled garage at his home in University Park, Dallas, and which he drove twice a year, once to the annual Carroll Shelby Foundation Gala in Las Vegas in October, and once to the New Orleans Concours d'Elegance in Audubon Park, Louisiana, in late October. The New Orleans Concours had occurred 2 weeks before Carter Whitfield's visit to Beau's garage. Aaron Shelby had heard Beau's name mentioned by a foundation-affiliated restorer he had visited briefly in Lafayette on the Sunday morning after the event. Aaron Shelby called Beau at 11:17 on Friday night, October 22, 2027, Mr. Thibodeau, Mr. Shelby. I had dinner this evening in Dallas with Joe Conway. Joe had received a call earlier today from Vivienne Whitfield's first cousin, Travis Whitman of Beaumont, Texas, who wished to discuss a private sale arrangement involving a 1965 Shelby Cobra 427 competition that Mr. Whitman had previously sold to the Whitfields in 2022. Joe found the conversation interesting. He passed it along to me at dinner. I made some phone calls. The name Beau Thibodeau came up, the son of J.B. Thibodeau. Is this correct? It is, Mr. Shelby. And is the vehicle in your possession the second 1967 Super Snake? No. It is a 1965 Cobra 427 competition, modified by a Swiss workshop in approximately 1995, using period-correct stamping dies stolen from Shelby American in Las Vegas in November of 1992. The chassis number has been ground down and restamped as CSX 3303. The body has been resprayed. The engine identification plate has been replaced. I have identified the vehicle. I have informed Carter and Vivienne Whitfield. They have left my garage. The Saudi buyer in Riyadh will not wire the funds. Madonna mia, Aaron Shelby said. I'm sorry, my wife is Italian. I say that when I am surprised. It is the appropriate response, Mr. Shelby. Mr. Thibodeau. May I drive to Lafayette tomorrow morning? I would like to see the vehicle before the Whitfields arrange to remove it. They have not arranged to remove it. They left it on the trailer in my parking lot when they departed this afternoon. I do not believe they intend to come back for it. Then I will be there at 11 tomorrow morning. I am driving from Dallas. It is 6 hours and 43 minutes. May I bring my grandfather's 1965 Cobra Roadster? I would like to see what your father JB's son does to a vehicle that should not exist when a vehicle that should exist is parked beside it. Bring it, Mr. Shelby. I will make chicory coffee. My mother will make boudin. She lives 4 miles west. She will be at the garage by 10:30, Mr. Thibodeau. Did your father, JB, ever tell you about my grandfather's 70th birthday party in Las Vegas in November of 1993? My father did not speak often about Carroll Shelby. He kept the relationship private. He brought my grandfather a small bottle of homemade Lafayette boudin sausage as a birthday gift. My grandfather laughed for 10 minutes and then ate it with great seriousness. I was 21 years old. I remember it. My grandfather told me later that J.B. Thibodeau was the most honest parts dealer he had ever worked with. He told me that the Cajun French had a saying for what your father embodied. The saying was avec cœur et honneur, with heart and honor. I have not been to Lafayette since I was 16 years old. I am driving tomorrow because of you. But I am also driving because of him. Aaron Shelby arrived at Thibodeau Performance at 11:04 on Saturday morning, October 23rd, in Carroll Shelby's personal 1965 Cobra 427 Roadster in Guardsman blue with Wimbledon white racing stripes. The Cobra had been Carroll Shelby's personal vehicle for 47 years. It had not, since Carroll Shelby's death in May of 2012, been driven by anyone other than Aaron Shelby. It had been driven in those 15 years and 5 months, approximately 18,000 miles, almost entirely between Dallas, Texas, and various Carroll Shelby Foundation events in the southern United States. Mama Thibodeau had arrived at 10:28 in her 1998 Buick LeSabre, carrying a large covered ceramic dish of homemade boudin, a smaller dish of cracklins, and a thermos of Chicory coffee. She had set them on the small folding table Beau kept in the back office for customer meetings. She had not spoken English since arriving. She had embraced Aaron Shelby in the Cajun French way with both hands on his shoulders and had spoken to him in Cajun French for the first 90 seconds of their meeting in a way that Aaron Shelby, who did not speak any French, had understood perfectly because the language of welcome did not require translation. Adele had translated the parts that required translation. Aaron Shelby spent 2 hours and 48 minutes inspecting the Whitfield vehicle, with Beau and Adele and Trevor and Mama Thibodeau all present. He confirmed Beau's findings. He took 14 additional photographs. He took 2 telephone calls to Joe Conway in California, the second of which lasted 17 minutes. At approximately 2:30, he sat down at the desk in the back office and looked at Beau. Mr. Thibodeau, Joe Conway and Neil Cummings have agreed. The Foundation and Carroll Shelby International will issue a joint public statement on November 15th disavowing the Whitfield vehicle as a counterfeit. We will name the Swiss workshop. We will name the stolen dies. We will, after consultation with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, name the 2022 private sale through Travis Whitman of Beaumont. Meckham Auctions will be notified on November 16th. The Whitfields will not, after November 17th, be in a position to sell the vehicle to the Saudi buyer at the figure they have been quoting. He paused. Mr. Thibodeau, your father did not believe the second 1967 Super Snake would ever be successfully counterfeited. He told my grandfather this in 1978, when my grandfather visited Lafayette for the only time in his life. Your father said that some vehicles were too rare to fake because the people who would buy them would also be the people who would recognize them. He was wrong. The people who would buy them are not the people who would recognize them anymore. The people who would recognize them are the people who would inherit them. There are 7 of us left in the United States who can definitively identify the second Super Snake. 3 are in California, 1 is in Nevada, 1 is in Arizona, 1 is in Texas, and the 7th, Thibodeau, is sitting across from me in his father's garage on Vermilion Boulevard in Lafayette, Louisiana, drinking Chicory coffee his mother made, with his 17-year-old daughter standing beside him. He stood up. My grandfather would have wanted to be in this room. I am sorry that he is not. But I am here, and I think, Mr. Thibodeau, that for tonight that will have to be enough. Beau de Thibodeau did not respond immediately. He looked at the framed photograph of his father on the wall above the desk. J.B. in his United States Army artillery uniform at Fort Polk, Louisiana, in 1967, 20 years old, 3 years before his honorable discharge, hair already dark and curly in the way that Beau's hair had once been, and that Adele's hair was now. He looked back at Aaron Shelby. Mr. Shelby, I have one more thing to ask of you. Anything, Mr. Thibodeau. I would like you to come to my mother's house on the eve of All Saints' Day next year. Mama Thibodeau's home on Old Spanish Trail. She will host a Sunday dinner of gumbo and jambalaya and crawfish etouffee for our family. I would like to invite you to be present. It is a Cajun American tradition that I think my father would have wanted you to experience. Aaron Shelby looked at Mama Thibodeau, who was standing in the doorway of the back office holding her empty thermos. Mama Thibodeau looked at Aaron Shelby and said, in Cajun French, the only sentence Mama Thibodeau would speak in English to Aaron Shelby during their entire acquaintance. "You come, mon cher. We feed you good." Joe Conway and Neil Cummings, the co-chief executive officers of Carroll Shelby International, issued the joint public statement on Sunday, November 15, 2027, at 7 o'clock in the morning Pacific Time. The statement was 1,100 words long. It identified the Whitfield vehicle as a counterfeit. It named the Swiss workshop in Lugano that had been responsible for the modification. It named the stolen Shelby American stamping dies from November of 1992. It cited Beau Thibodeau as the originating expert witness. It included a personal endorsement of Beau's findings from Aaron Shelby in his capacity as a board member of Carroll Shelby International and co-president of the Carroll Shelby Foundation. The statement was picked up by the Associated Press at 8:45 Pacific Time, by Bloomberg at 9:10, by Reuters at 9:42, and by the Wall Street Journal Automotive Desk at 10:33. Hannah Brennan, who had been the Wall Street Journal's Miami Bureau classic car authentication correspondent since the previous spring, was contacted by Joe Conway directly at 10:45. She accepted the assignment. She booked a flight from Miami International to Lafayette Regional Airport that same Sunday afternoon. She landed at 6:42 in the evening. She drove a rental Hyundai Sonata to Beau's garage and arrived at 8:14. Beau gave her 3 hours. They sat in the back office. Beau answered her questions. Mama Thibodeau made jambalaya and refused to leave the office. Adele stayed and listened and did not speak. Hannah Brennan took 12 pages of handwritten notes. She left at 11:30. The Miami Herald front page coverage on Tuesday, November 17th, was written under Hannah Brennan's byline, syndicated nationally through the Wall Street Journal's wire service, and was 6,200 words long. It included a sidebar interview with Aaron Shelby. It included a sidebar interview with Mama Thibodeau, conducted partly in Cajun French and translated by Adele. It included a photograph taken by Hannah's photographer David Ortiz on the morning of Monday, November 16th, of Beau Thibodeau standing in Bay 1 of Thibodeau Performance holding his father's leather-bound notebook, open to a page on which J.B. Thibodeau's signature appeared 4 times. The Whitfield vehicle was visible in the background of the photograph, parked beside Aaron Shelby's 1965 Cobra 427 Roadster in Guardsman blue. The Lafayette Parish Council voted on the Whitfield Energy Lafayette Energy Tower variance request on Tuesday, November 30th, at the regular evening session. The vote was 11-2 against the variance. The 2 yes votes were cast by council members Patrick Boudreau of District 4 and Marlene Hebert of District 7, both of whom had received campaign contributions from Whitfield Energy in 2026, both of whom would, in the months that followed, become the subject of active investigations by the Louisiana Board of Ethics and the Federal Bureau of Investigation Public Corruption Unit out of New Orleans. Adele Thibodeau received her Louisiana State University Honors College early decision acceptance on Saturday, December 18th at 2:17 in the afternoon. The notification was delivered by email to Adele's account and by automated phone call to the small house on Carmel Drive. Adele received the news at the kitchen table while eating a slice of cracklins her grandmother had brought over earlier in the week. She walked to the back office of Thibodeau Performance with the LSU acceptance letter printed on plain white paper, set it on the desk in front of Beau, and stood there until her father had finished reading it. Beau Thibodeau did not cry. He had not, in the 11 years and 1 month since his wife had died, cried in front of his daughter. He stood up slowly, walked around the desk, and embraced Adele for 51 seconds. Adele cried. Beau did not. Tiffany Whitfield was indicted by a federal grand jury in the Western District of Louisiana on Wednesday, February 10, 2028, for conspiracy to commit honest services fraud relating to her relationship with Dr. Margaret Reeves of LSU. She entered a plea of guilty on April 12th in exchange for a sentence of 28 months in federal minimum security and her cooperation against her mother and stepfather. Carter Whitfield III was indicted by a federal grand jury in the Southern District of Texas on Wednesday, February 17, 2028, on charges that included racketeering, wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, securities fraud relating to undisclosed Cayman Islands holdings, and violations of the Federal Auto Parts Fraud Prevention Act. The indictment cited the Shelby Cobra matter as its predicate act. The Louisiana Attorney General's office, under Attorney General Jeff Landry, filed parallel state racketeering charges on March 3, 2028. Carter Whitfield entered a plea of guilty on August 14, 2028, in exchange for a sentence of 78 months in a federal minimum security facility in Beaumont, Texas. He began serving his sentence on October 6, 2028. Vivian Whitfield entered a plea of guilty as a co-conspirator on May 9, 2028, in exchange for a sentence of 42 months in a federal minimum security facility in Pensacola, Florida. She began serving her sentence on July 11th. Whitfield Energy filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection on Thursday, October 5, 2028. The filing was converted to Chapter 7 liquidation on Friday, December 22nd. The civil settlements followed. Carroll Shelby International and the Carroll Shelby Foundation paid Beau Thibodeau a class action restitution participation fee of $1,200,000 for his role as the originating expert witness in the Whitfield investigation. Meckham Auctions paid Beau a consulting fee of $180,000. The Louisiana Attorney General's office paid Beau a witness compensation fee of $80,000. The federal racketeering forfeiture distribution, which was divided among Beau and 14 other Lafayette Parish property owners, whose buildings Carter and Vivian Whitfield had targeted through shell entities, paid Beau $1,900,000. The Whitfield Energy bankruptcy creditor settlement, in which Beau was a Class B creditor in his capacity as the lessee of his garage building, which Whitfield Energy had purchased through a Cayman Islands shell entity in 2025 and had attempted to evict him from in 2026, paid Beau $2,400,000. The civil lawsuit Beau filed against Carter and Vivian Whitfield personally for intentional infliction of emotional distress and defamation related to the November 17th Wall Street Journal article and subsequent press coverage, settled in mediation on October 11, 2028, for $1,600,000. The total recovery before taxes was $7,360,000. Beau declined every major media interview request after the original Hannah Brennan piece. He gave one additional interview to the Acadian Advocate, the small Cajun American community newspaper of Lafayette, which had covered J.B. Thibodeau's funeral in 2016, and which had run a feature on Emily Reyes Thibodeau's funeral the same year. The article ran in the November 28, 2028 issue. It was 1,400 words long. The headline, in both Cajun French and English, was Le Fils de J.B. sauve Lafayette. J.B.'s son saves Lafayette. The photograph was of Beau, Adele, Mama Thibodeau, Aaron Shelby, and the framed photograph of J.B. Thibodeau in his United States Army artillery uniform. The Carroll Shelby Foundation extended a formal invitation to Beau Thibodeau on October 14, 2028, to serve on the judging panel of the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance for the August 2029 event. Beau would be the first Cajun American Carroll Shelby licensed restoration modifier in the history of the Concours d'Elegance to receive such an invitation. He accepted on October 16th. On the cold and clear morning of All Saints' Day, November 1, 2028, 3 weeks after Adele Thibodeau had moved into her LSU Honors College dormitory in Baton Rouge for the second semester of her freshman year, and 4 weeks after Carter Whitfield had begun serving his federal sentence in Beaumont, Texas, Beau Thibodeau sat on the front porch of the small house on Carmel Drive, drinking his second cup of chicory coffee of the morning when his daughter Adele walked out onto the porch, wearing the gray LSU sweatshirt he had given her on the morning of her acceptance letter the previous December. She had driven home from Baton Rouge the previous evening. She had arrived at 9:45. She had hugged her grandmother for almost 3 minutes at the kitchen table. She had eaten a small plate of jambalaya. She had asked her father if she could open her mother's 13th letter on All Saints' Day morning, which was the letter Emily had written for Adele's 18th birthday, which Beau had been carrying in his shirt pocket folded into thirds for the previous 8 days, waiting for Adele to come home. Beau handed her the letter on the porch. She opened it. She read it silently. She did not cry. She read it a second time. She handed it back to her father. Papa, Mama wants you to go to the cabin. I know, ma fille. I read it last week. Mama wants both of us to go to the cabin. I know. Will you take me? Yes, ma fille. I will take you. The drive from Carmel Drive in Lafayette to the Thibodeau family Bayou cabin near Henderson, Louisiana, was 35 miles east on I-10, then south on Louisiana Highway 347 through the small towns of Breaux Bridge and Catahoula. Beau drove the 1968 Shelby Mustang GT350 he had owned since 2003, which Adele had grown up riding into her grandmother's house on Sundays, which still had Emily's small Saint Christopher medal hanging from the rearview mirror because Beau had never moved it after Emily had hung it there in 2009 when Adele had been born. They arrived at the cabin at 9:42 in the morning. The cabin had been built by Beau's great-grandfather, Aristide Thibodeau, in 1923 on a 4-acre lot the family had purchased from the state of Louisiana for $94 during a small public land sale that had occurred during the Great Depression. The cabin was a one-room raised structure on Cypress pilings with a small attic above the main room, accessible only by a wooden ladder that J.B. Thibodeau had built in 1971 and that Beau had not climbed since 2016. He climbed it that morning with Adele watching from below. The attic contained 9 cardboard boxes of family papers dating back to the 1940s, a small steamer trunk that had belonged to Aristide Thibodeau's wife, Marie-Claire Thibodeau, and a separate locked wooden trunk that J.B. held himself in the spring of 1972, in the months after Carroll Shelby had reclaimed the 2 prototype Cobras that J.B. had stored for him for nearly 4 years. Beau opened the trunk. Inside were 3 things. The first was a small handwritten note in J.B. Thibodeau's careful Caucasian French handwriting dated March 8, 1972, which read, Pour mon fils Beau si jamais il en a besoin. Carroll est un homme de cœur et d'honneur. Notre amitié est un trésor, ce sont les preuves. Pour si jamais quelqu'un demande. For my son Beau, if he ever needs it. Carroll is a man of heart and honor. Our friendship is a treasure. Here is the proof. For if anyone ever asks. The second was a handwritten letter from Carroll Shelby to J.B. Thibodeau, dated March 8, 1972, on the original Shelby American Las Vegas letterhead, written in Carroll Shelby's distinctive block capital handwriting. The letter described in detail the circumstances under which Ford Motor Company had ordered Carroll Shelby in 1968 to destroy 2 prototype 1967 Cobra Supersnake variants that had not passed Ford's internal safety certification testing, and J.B. Thibodeau's role in driving from Lafayette to Las Vegas to retrieve the 2 vehicles and store them at his own expense until Ford's contractual destruction order had expired. It concluded with Carroll Shelby's signature and a postscript that read, J.B. if anyone ever asks. These 2 cars were preserved with my full authorization for historical purposes. They were not destroyed as Ford ordered. The decision was mine. I take full responsibility. Avec cœur et honneur. Your friend, Carroll. The third was a black and white photograph dated April 2, 1969, on which Carroll Shelby and J.B. Thibodeau stood together in front of the small Lafayette parts depot Shelby American had operated between 1968 and 1975. Between them, holding Carroll Shelby's left hand and J.B. Thibodeau's right hand, was a small dark-haired 4-year-old boy with a chicory coffee mustache around his mouth and a profoundly serious expression on his face. The boy was Beau. Beau came down the ladder slowly. He handed Adele the photograph. She looked at it for a long time. She did not say anything. They drove to St. Mary Magdalene Catholic Cemetery in Lafayette at 3 in the afternoon. Mama Thibodeau met them at the gate. She was holding a bundle of white chrysanthemums that she had picked from her garden that morning. The chrysanthemums were the All Saints' Day flower of the Acadian tradition. The Thibodeau family plot contained 4 graves. Beau's great-grandparents Aristide and Marie-Claire, Beau's father J.B., Beau's wife Emily. The 2 recent graves were side by side, separated by approximately 3 feet of grass that had not yet fully grown over the disturbed earth. Beau placed the framed copy of Carroll Shelby's 1972 letter on J.B.'s grave. He placed a small framed copy of the April 1969 photograph beside it. He took the Cypress-handled mechanic's wrench Aaron Shelby would give him at Sunday dinner that evening. Aaron had given Beau the wrench in advance, in private, on Friday afternoon at the garage, with a request that Beau bring it to the cemetery the following day before bringing it home, and he placed the wrench between J.B.'s grave and Emily's grave. He stood for a long time without speaking. Adele spoke first. She spoke in Cajun French in the careful way she had learned from her grandmother and her mother before she had learned it from her father. Papa, maman, grand-père, je vais à LSU comme maman l'aurait voulu, je serai docteur. Je porterai votre nom avec honneur, father, mother, grandfather. I am going to LSU as mama would have wanted. I will be a doctor. I will carry your name with honor. Beau cried for the first time in 12 years and 1 month. He had not cried since Emily's funeral on November 17, 2016. He cried for 38 seconds. Mama Thibodeau put her left hand on his right shoulder. She spoke in Cajun French. Mon fils, tu pleures parce qu'ils peuvent maintenant te voir. JB et Émilie, ils peuvent voir Adèle. Ils peuvent voir l'homme que tu es devenu. Pleure, mon fils, pleure pour eux, pleure pour toi, my son. You cry because they can see you now, JB and Emily. They can see Adèle, they can see the man you have become. Cry, my son, cry for them, cry for yourself. He cried for an additional 62 seconds, then he stopped. He helped his mother to her feet from where she had been kneeling beside JB's grave. He held Adèle's left hand with his right hand. He walked them both to the small parking lot of St. Mary Magdalene Cemetery, where Aaron Shelby was waiting for them in his rental Toyota Camry, which he had driven from the New Orleans Concours d'Elegance preview reception that morning. They drove to Mama Thibodeau's Acadian raised cottage on Old Spanish Trail in 2 vehicles. Beau and Adèle in the GT 350, Aaron Shelby following in the Camry. The Sunday dinner began at 4:45. The table had been set for 13, Mama Thibodeau, Beau, Adèle, Aaron Shelby, Trevor Boudreau, and his girlfriend Lucy Maton from Erath, Mama's 2 sisters from Brobridge, 3 of Beau's cousins from St. Martin Parish, and Father Antoine Leger from St. Mary Magdalene. The menu was gumbo, jambalaya, boudin, crawfish étouffée, dirty rice, fried plantains, an avocado and citrus salad that Tante Rosalie had brought from her garden in Brobridge, and a small lemon icebox pie that Adèle had baked from Émilie's handwritten recipe in the small kitchen on Carmel Drive on Friday evening. Aaron Shelby gave Beau the Cypress-handled mechanic's wrench during dessert. He had retrieved it from the cemetery before driving to Old Spanish Trail. He handed it to Beau across the table. He spoke quietly, Mr. Thibodeau. My grandfather had 3 wrenches he used on every Cobra he personally tuned between 1963 and 1968. He gave one to a master technician in Long Beach, California in 1970. He gave one to a master technician in Phoenix, Arizona in 1975. The 3rd was the one in his hand the day he died in May of 2012. I have had it since. He would have wanted it to come home to Louisiana, to the worthy son of J.B. Thibodeau. Welcome to the Shelby family, Beau. Beau accepted the wrench. He did not speak. He looked at his mother. He looked at Adèle. He set the wrench on the table beside his half-finished plate of crawfish étouffée. Mama Thibodeau stood up. She walked around the table to where Aaron Shelby was sitting. She placed both of her hands on his shoulders in the Cajun way. She spoke in Cajun French. Mon fils, tu es venu chez nous le jour des Toussaints. Tu apportes l'amitié de ton grand-père. Bienvenue dans la famille Thibodeau. Tu seras toujours bienvenu à ma table. My son, you came to our house on All Saints' Day. You bring your grandfather's friendship. Welcome to the Thibodeau family. You will always be welcome at my table, Adèle translated. Aaron Shelby's eyes filled with tears. He did not let them fall. Father Leger said grace in Cajun French. The 13 of them ate. After dinner, Aaron Shelby drove back to his hotel in Baton Rouge. The guests departed. Father Leger walked back to the rectory of St. Mary Magdalene, which was 3 blocks east. Beau and Adèle stayed. They washed the dishes with Mama Thibodeau at the small kitchen sink. Adèle dried, Beau put away, Mama washed. When the dishes were done, Adèle drove the GT 350 back to Carmel Drive alone. She would sleep at the Carmel Drive house and drive back to Baton Rouge in the morning. Beau stayed at his mother's house. He sat on the small front porch with Mama Thibodeau. They drank chicory coffee and watched the All Saints' Day stars come out over the Acadian raised cottage that the Thibodeau family had owned since 1872. Beau spoke first. He spoke in Cajun French. Maman, c'est fini ce soir. Le combat. Adèle est sauve. La maison est sauve. Papa est honoré. Émilie est honorée. Carroll Shelby est honoré. Et toi, maman? Toi aussi. Tu es honorée, mother. It is over tonight. The fight. Adèle is safe. The home is safe. Father is honored. Emily is honored. Carroll Shelby is honored. And you, mother, you also. You are honored. Mama Thibodeau did not respond for a long time. She drank her chicory. She watched the stars. She finally spoke. Mon fils, tu es honoré aussi. Tu es l'homme que ton père aurait voulu que tu sois. Tu es l'homme que ta femme savait que tu serais. Tu es le père que ta fille mérite. Tu es le fils que je voulais avoir. Tu es honoré, Beau, avec cœur et honneur, comme ton père, comme Carroll, comme tous les Thibodeaux qui sont venus avant toi, my son. You are honored also. You are the man your father would have wanted you to be. You are the man your wife knew you would become. You are the father your daughter deserves. You are the son I wanted to have. You are honored, Beau. With heart and honor, like your father, like Carroll. Like all the Thibodeaux who came before you, he sat with her until the chicory was gone. Beau Thibodeau was a Cajun American mechanic on Vermilion Boulevard in Lafayette, Louisiana. He had been a Carroll Shelby licensed restoration modifier at Shelby American in Las Vegas for 21 years. He was the father of an 18-year-old pre-med freshman at the Louisiana State University Honors College. He was the son of a Cajun American auto parts dealer who had been Carroll Shelby's most trusted Louisiana contact for 17 years, and the son of a 78-year-old Acadian American mother who had spent 12 years carrying the silence of her widowhood with the kind of dignity that did not require words. He was, for the first time in 144 months, no longer afraid. He was still here. He was still listening. He was still telling the truth.